So when you're doing the hip hinge, remember that it's your hips that are hinging. It's not, sometimes people like to confuse it with a squat. So we're not squatting, you're not squatting down. You're going to have a little bit of bend in your knees, but it's mostly at the hips, okay? So I always recommend that you use this. And the second thing I always recommend is that you do it in front of a mirror. That way you can watch yourself and you can watch if your spine is staying straight. So those are the two most important things about practicing the hip hinge. Then as you practice it more, it'll just become second nature. So to do the hip hinge with your stick, you want to put it behind you. You want to line it up with your tailbone, along your spine, and then to the back of your head. So it looks like this. And if your extension, you want to make sure you have a little bit of an arch in your low back. You don't want your low back flat against the stick. If you're flexion, that's okay. If you're flexion, have this flatter, but still a tiny bit. But if you're extension, you can put your hand in here to kind of maintain that arch. So that's important. So then you have this touching your tailbone, the back of your head, and your hand here to keep that arch. And then you just hinge. And it's just a little movement. It's not, you're not bending to the floor. It's just a little movement, especially initially because your hips are still probably not flexible enough. So you line up like this and brace because your core is doing the work here. And you go forward. So see how it's just a little movement, and I'm bending all at my hips. So you're not bending your spine, you're not squatting. I mean, you have a little bit of a bend in your knee, but you're not squatting down. It's just a hinge.